Hi guys and welcome to Crazy Pepper Revenge. This channel is all about crazy true stories, stuff that happens in real life when things get a little bit messy.
My ex-wife handed me divorce documents at my mother's funeral. She told me it was perfect timing, one less distraction to deal with. I signed everything right there in the church parking lot while still dressed in my black suit. What she had no clue about was that my mother had just left me $4.2 million, and the ironclad prenuptial agreement she'd demanded 3 years earlier meant she walked away with absolutely zero. Even her attorney couldn't help but crack up when he found out. Let me rewind and explain how everything unfolded. I'm Ethan, 34 years old, working as an elementary school teacher in Minnesota. I teach fourth graders and genuinely love what I do, even though the compensation is pretty terrible. My annual salary sits around $48,000, which keeps me afloat but doesn't exactly scream financial success. I've been in education for 8 years now and wouldn't trade it for anything. My mother, Dorothy, was an absolute angel. She raised my sister Natalie and me alone after our father died when I was 6 years old. Throughout my childhood, she juggled 2 jobs without ever complaining once. During the day, she worked as an administrative assistant, and at night, she cleaned corporate offices. She made sure we had everything we needed, even when it meant she went without basic comforts herself. Here's what nobody except Natalie and I knew about our mother. She had an incredible gift for managing finances. While working those exhausting jobs, she'd been investing every spare dollar since the 1980s. Nothing extravagant, just consistent small amounts. She purchased rental properties during the 90s when prices were low and invested in technology stocks before they skyrocketed. By the time I entered college, she'd quietly accumulated a substantial fortune. She never flaunted it, though. She continued driving a 15-year-old sedan, clipping grocery coupons, and living in the same modest house she'd purchased back in 1987. Now, let me tell you about my former wife, Vanessa. I met her 4 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding reception. She was absolutely gorgeous with long dark hair and a captivating smile. She worked selling luxury real estate and pulled in solid commissions, probably around $120,000 annually. The warning signs were visible from the beginning, but I was too infatuated to notice them. The first major red flag was her family. Her parents lived in this enormous mansion in an exclusive suburb. Her father owned multiple car dealerships, and her mother spent her days at country clubs without working. They had that wealthy attitude where they looked down on anyone with a regular job. At our first family dinner, her father asked about my profession. When I mentioned elementary school teacher, the atmosphere turned ice cold immediately. Her mother repeated the word teaching like I'd announced I worked in waste management, then added how noble of me in the most condescending tone imaginable. Vanessa quickly jumped in, explaining how I planned to move into school administration soon, and that teaching was merely a stepping stone. I had no such plans, but I stayed quiet because I wanted to make a positive impression. Her brother Trevor was even more insufferable. He worked at their father's dealership, doing essentially nothing while earning 6 figures. He spent our entire first meeting bragging about his luxury car and downtown condo. When I mentioned my 2009 Honda Civic, he actually laughed and called it adorable, like a starter vehicle. But Vanessa seemed different from her family, or so I convinced myself. She'd tell me she didn't care about money, that what mattered was my passion for teaching and being good at it. She'd claim her family was materialistic, but she wasn't like them. Looking back now, every single word was a complete lie. We dated for a year before I proposed. The proposal was straightforward and simple. I took her to the park where we'd had our first date, got down on one knee with a ring I'd saved 6 months to afford. It wasn't massive, maybe half a carat, but it represented what I could manage financially. Her reaction when she saw it? Her smile faltered for just a split second before she recovered. Just a brief moment, but I caught it. I should have paid attention to that instant. I should have realized the woman who claimed not to care about money was disappointed by a modest engagement ring. Wedding planning turned into an absolute nightmare. Her parents wanted this massive country club affair with 300 guests. I wanted something smaller and affordable. We compromised, which really meant I surrendered on everything because her parents were funding most of it anyway. The guest list expanded to 250 people, with 200 being her family's friends and business connections. The venue was this ridiculous estate with a price tag that made me physically ill. Her dress cost more than my entire car. Everything had to be perfect and impressive for appearances. My mother approached me 3 months before the wedding with an offer. She wanted to contribute $30,000 toward wedding expenses so I wouldn't feel completely steamrolled by Vanessa's parents. I was shocked because that was far more than I thought she could spare. I protested, but she insisted it was her money, and she wanted me to have a wedding I could be proud of, not just something her parents orchestrated. I used $15,000 for the rehearsal dinner and my side of expenses, then put the other $15,000 in savings. I didn't tell Vanessa about the full amount because something told me to keep that information private. Then came the prenuptial agreement discussion. 3 months before the wedding, Vanessa brought it up over dinner. Her family's attorney had drafted a prenuptial agreement they wanted us to sign. She explained it was just to protect both of us, given the family business and everything. I read through the document carefully. The terms were straightforward enough. What each person brought into the marriage remained theirs in case of divorce, no alimony unless the marriage lasted more than 10 years. Assets acquired during marriage would be split equally. But inheritances remained separate property. What struck me was how heavily it favored her side. It was clearly written assuming she was the one with assets to protect. There were clauses about protecting her commission income, her future inheritance from her parents, and a trust fund I didn't even know existed. I told her I wanted my own attorney to review it before signing. She got immediately defensive, saying it was insulting that I didn't trust her family's lawyer. But I stood firm on this point. I found an attorney through a teacher colleague. His name was Gregory, and he specialized in family law. He reviewed the prenup and gave me his honest assessment. This document is designed to protect wealthy people from gold diggers. Your fiance's family clearly thinks you're the gold digger. But honestly, given your income disparity, this actually protects you too. If she divorces you, you don't owe her anything. And any inheritance you receive stays yours alone. That last part stuck with me. Any inheritance stays separate property. I signed it, and Vanessa was thrilled that I'd finally come around. Her parents seemed pleased that I'd done the right thing. The marriage was fine for the first 6 months. Not great, not terrible, just fine. We lived in a decent 2-bedroom apartment that we could afford on our combined income. Vanessa kept working her real estate job, and I kept teaching. But slowly things started shifting in a negative direction. Vanessa would make comments about my income. Little digs that seemed like jokes, but had a sharp edge to them. She'd complain that we couldn't afford nicer vacations because of my teaching salary. She'd point out houses her clients were buying and sigh about how we'd never be able to afford something like that on my income. Her family was even worse about it. Sunday dinners at her parents' house became exercises in passive-aggressive commentary about my career choices. Her father would talk about Trevor's latest promotion or Vanessa's biggest commission, then turn to me and ask how the alphabet lessons were going. Her mother would show me pictures of her friends' children, all in finance or medicine or law, and ask when I planned to advance in my career. I started dreading those dinners and making excuses to skip them. Vanessa would get angry, saying I was embarrassing her by not showing up to family events. I'd point out that her family spent the entire time insulting my profession. She'd say I was being too sensitive and overreacting. My mother noticed the change in me. She'd always liked Vanessa, but had reservations about the family. About a year into my marriage, she pulled me aside after a visit and asked directly if I was happy. I wanted to say yes, wanted to believe I was happy. But sitting there looking at my mother, I couldn't lie to her. I admitted I didn't know, that sometimes it felt like Vanessa married who she thought I could become, not who I actually was. My mother nodded slowly and said, "That's not a marriage, that's a disappointment waiting to happen." She was right, of course. She was always right about people. Things deteriorated in year 2. Vanessa started talking more seriously about me switching careers. She'd found a job posting for an assistant principal position that paid $75,000 and sent it to me saying it could be perfect. I wasn't interested in administration because I liked being in the classroom with kids. But she kept pushing, kept sending job listings, kept talking about how we could finally afford a house if I'd just be practical about my career. Her commissions were growing, and she was pulling in close to $150,000 by this point. But instead of that taking pressure off, it made things worse. Now she resented being the breadwinner while I was content making teacher wages. The fight started. Not screaming matches, but cold arguments where she'd list all the things we couldn't do because I refused to advance my career. Couldn't buy a house in the neighborhood she wanted. Couldn't take the European vacation her friends were taking. Couldn't join the country club where her parents were members. I'd point out that we were doing fine financially, that we had savings and no debt except my small student loans, and we weren't struggling. But doing fine wasn't enough for Vanessa. She wanted more, always more. My mother's health started declining around this time. She was 68 and had been diagnosed with early-stage heart disease. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but enough to make us all worry. Natalie and I started taking turns staying with her on weekends to help with errands and medical appointments. Vanessa hated it and said I was spending too much time at my mother's house, that she was capable of taking care of herself. When I explained that my mother had spent decades taking care of us, and now it was our turn to help her, Vanessa rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic. The breaking point in our marriage came about 6 months ago, just after our 3rd anniversary. Vanessa had been increasingly distant, working longer hours, taking calls in the other room. Classic signs of infidelity, but I was too busy worrying about my mother to notice the pattern. My mother's heart condition had worsened, and she was in and out of the hospital for monitoring. The doctor said her heart was weaker than they'd hoped and she might need surgery. Natalie and I were terrified. Vanessa's reaction when I told her? Well, she lived a good life. At least she's had time to get her affairs in order. My mother wasn't dying. She was sick. There's a difference. But Vanessa was already writing her off as gone. That's when I started finding the receipts. Expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel room charges on our joint credit card that Vanessa explained away as client meetings. Flowers purchased that I never received. I'm not an idiot, and I knew what was happening, but I was so focused on my mother that I couldn't deal with my crumbling marriage at the same time. So I just let it happen, stopped asking questions, stopped caring about where Vanessa was or who she was with. My mother noticed before I said anything. One weekend, when I was staying with her, she looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "She's cheating on you, isn't she?" I didn't even try to deny it, just nodded. She asked what I was going to do about it. I told her I didn't know, that I'd deal with it after she was better because I couldn't handle both crises at once. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. She told me she needed to tell me something, that she'd been meeting with her estate attorney, getting everything organized, in case something happened. She said she'd done well with her investments over the years, better than I realized, and that when she was gone, Natalie and I would be taken care of, very well taken care of. She wouldn't tell me exact numbers, just said she'd built up a comfortable amount and that we shouldn't worry about money when the time came. I assumed she meant maybe 200 or 300,000 split between Natalie and me, enough to be helpful, but not life-changing. I had absolutely no idea what was actually coming. 3 months ago, my mother had the surgery. It went as well as could be expected, but she never really recovered. Her heart was just too weak. She spent 6 weeks in and out of consciousness with Natalie and me, taking shifts at the hospital. Vanessa visited twice. Both times she stayed less than an hour, spending most of the time on her phone checking work emails. The nurses thought she was Natalie's friend, not my wife. That's how disconnected she was from my family. My mother passed away on a Tuesday morning. I was holding her hand when she went. She squeezed my fingers one last time and whispered, "You're going to be okay, better than okay, trust me." Then she was gone. The grief was crushing and overwhelming. I took a week off work, which Vanessa complained about because I was wallowing. She wanted me back to normal immediately so we could move forward with our lives. Like my mother dying was an inconvenience to her schedule. The funeral was planned for the following Saturday. I spent the week making arrangements, writing the eulogy, choosing the music my mother would have wanted. Natalie helped as much as she could while dealing with her own grief. Her husband was incredibly supportive, taking care of their kids so she could focus on the arrangements. Vanessa was absent for all of it, saying she had important client meetings that she couldn't reschedule, that my mother would understand that work comes first. Friday night before the funeral, I was lying in bed trying to sleep when Vanessa came in late from another supposed client dinner. She sat on the edge of the bed and I knew something was coming. She said we needed to talk. Great, the 4 worst words in the English language. She told me she wasn't happy, hadn't been happy for a long time, that this marriage wasn't working and she thought we should get divorced. I just stared at her. My mother had died 4 days ago. The funeral was tomorrow, and she was asking for a divorce right now. I asked if this could wait until after the funeral. She said she thought it was better to be honest about where we stood, that she'd already spoken to an attorney and the papers were being drawn up. We could make this quick and painless if we both agreed to the terms. I asked her who he was. She looked surprised and asked what I meant. I said the guy she'd been seeing, who is he? She claimed she didn't know what I was talking about. I told her I'd known for months. I just didn't have the energy to deal with it while my mother was dying. So who is he? She was quiet for a long moment, then shrugged. His name is Preston. He's a commercial real estate developer. They met through work. I asked how long. She asked if it mattered. I repeated the question. About 8 months, she finally admitted. 8 months. She'd been cheating on me for 8 months while my mother was dying. She said he treats her like she deserves to be treated, that he's ambitious and successful, that he's not content being a school teacher for the rest of his life. And there it was, the real issue. Not that I'd done anything wrong, but that I wasn't successful enough for her, wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't making enough money. I told her fine, if she wanted a divorce, we'd get divorced. But could we please wait until after I buried my mother to discuss the details? She said she thought it was better to have everything out in the open now. Better for who? I asked. For her? Because it sure wasn't better for me to be dealing with this right now. She stood up and said she'd sleep in the guest room, that she'd already told the attorney to have the papers ready by Monday and we could sign them next week. She walked out, and I sat there in the dark, wondering how my life had fallen apart so completely in less than a week. The next morning was the funeral. I put on my suit, reviewed my notes for the eulogy, and headed to the church where the service was being held. Natalie was already there with her family, greeting people as they arrived. The church filled up quickly. My mother had many friends from her years in the community, former coworkers, neighbors, people from church, my fellow teachers who'd heard about her passing. It was standing room only by the time the service started. Vanessa showed up 15 minutes late, slipping into a pew in the back. She didn't sit with me, didn't acknowledge me, just sat there checking her phone. The service was beautiful. The pastor spoke about my mother's generosity and kindness. Natalie gave a tearful speech about what an incredible mother she'd been. Then it was my turn. I stood at the podium and looked out at all the people who'd come to say goodbye to my mother. I started talking about her strength, her work ethic, the sacrifices she'd made for Natalie and me, how she'd worked 2 jobs to keep us fed and clothed, how she'd never complained or asked for recognition, just did what needed to be done. I was maybe 5 minutes into the eulogy when I saw Vanessa stand up and walk toward the exit. She was leaving in the middle of my speech, walking out of my mother's funeral while I was eulogizing her. I paused mid-sentence, watching her go. The whole church noticed, and there was uncomfortable shifting in the pews as people processed what they were seeing. Natalie's face went red with anger, but I just continued. I finished the eulogy, talked about how my mother always said family was the most important thing, and how she'd taught me what real loyalty looked like. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who'd just watched my wife walk out. After the service, we went to the cemetery for the burial. It was a smaller group, just family and close friends. Vanessa wasn't there, didn't even pretend to care enough to come to the graveside service. We got through the burial and people came up to offer condolences, share memories of my mother, tell me what an amazing woman she'd been. I was on autopilot, thanking people mechanically, while my brain tried to process the fact that my wife had walked out of the funeral. After the burial, there was a reception at a nearby restaurant. Natalie had organized it, and it was nice, with people eating, sharing stories, celebrating my mother's life. I was standing by the buffet table when my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. She said she was in the parking lot and we needed to talk now. I walked outside to find Vanessa leaning against her car, holding a manila envelope. She looked impatient, like I was keeping her from something important. She said sorry to interrupt my day, but she needed me to sign these. She handed me the envelope. I opened it to find divorce papers, fully completed, just needing signatures. I asked if she couldn't wait one more day, if she had to bring these to my mother's funeral. She said perfect timing, actually, one less thing to worry about. Now that my mother was gone, I wouldn't be distracted by taking care of her anymore, and we could both move on with our lives. I just stared at her. This person I'd married had just said my mother's passing was convenient timing for a divorce. She'd told me to sign them, to just get this over with. You know what? She was right. Why drag it out? I pulled out a pen, leaned against her car, and signed every page that needed my signature. Didn't read the fine print, didn't negotiate, just signed. She looked surprised that I'd done it so quickly and asked if that was it, if I wasn't going to fight this. I asked why I would fight it. She clearly didn't want to be married to me. She'd been seeing someone else for 8 months. She just called my mother's passing convenient timing. I wasn't going to beg her to stay. I handed the papers back to her. She took them, looking oddly disappointed that I hadn't put up a fight. She said she'd have her attorney file these Monday morning and that I should start looking for a new apartment, because she was keeping our place since she made more money and could afford it on her own. I told her fine, take the apartment, take whatever she wanted, I didn't care anymore. She got in her car and drove away, I stood there in the parking lot in my funeral suit, officially separated from my wife on the day I buried my mother. Rock bottom, right? Except I didn't know what was coming. The reading of my mother's will was scheduled for Monday afternoon. Natalie and I met at the attorney's office, a man named Lawrence who'd been handling my mother's estate planning for years. Vanessa had texted me that morning saying she was filing the divorce papers. So by the time I showed up at Lawrence's office, my marriage was officially over. Lawrence was this older gentleman with kind eyes and a gentle manner. He expressed condolences about my mother, then got down to business. He said my mother was very specific about her wishes and had revised her will several times over the years, but the final version was completed about 3 months ago. 3 months ago, right after my mother's surgery, when she knew her time might be limited. Lawrence opened a folder and began reading. The first items were sentimental, my mother's jewelry to Natalie, her photo albums to be split between us, personal effects distributed to various friends and family members. Then he got to the real estate. Dorothy owned 3 rental properties, the house she lived in and 2 others she purchased as investments in the 1990s. Current market value of all 3 properties combined was approximately $1.1 million. These were to be split equally between Ethan and Natalie. Natalie and I exchanged shocked glances. $1.1 million in real estate. My mother had told us she'd done well with investments, but this was beyond anything we'd imagined. Lawrence continued, additionally, Dorothy had investment accounts with various firms, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, some cryptocurrency investments she'd made in recent years. The combined value of these accounts was approximately $2.7 million to be split equally between Ethan and Natalie. The room started spinning. $2.7 million in investments. My mother, who'd worked as a secretary and janitor, had accumulated $2.7 million. Lawrence looked up from the papers. There was also a life insurance policy valued at $500,000 to be split equally, and various bank accounts totaling approximately $400,000 also to be split equally. All told, Dorothy's estate was valued at approximately $4.7 million. After taxes and legal fees, we were each looking at inheriting roughly $2.1 million. I couldn't breathe. My mother had left me $2.1 million. Natalie was crying happy tears, shocked tears, grateful tears, all mixed together. Her husband put his arm around her, looking equally stunned. But my brain was doing math. Specifically, I was thinking about the prenup I'd signed 3 years ago. The prenup that stated inheritances remained separate property. The prenup Vanessa had insisted on to protect her family's wealth. Lawrence wasn't done. He said Dorothy also left specific instructions that she was aware of my marital difficulties. He pulled out a sealed letter addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. Lawrence handed it to me, but kept talking. She wanted to ensure that in the event of a divorce, this inheritance would be completely protected. She worked with me to structure everything so that not a single dollar could be claimed as marital property. The prenup you signed helps, but she went further. Everything is in trusts with specific clauses preventing any spousal claims. I opened the letter with shaking hands. My dearest Ethan, it began in my mother's neat handwriting. If you're reading this, I'm gone and I'm so sorry I can't be there with you. But I need you to know something. I've been watching your marriage for the past few years, and I've seen how Vanessa treats you. I've seen how her family looks down on you. I've seen you dimming your own light to make her feel brighter. That's not what love looks like, sweetheart. Real love builds you up. It doesn't tear you down for not making enough money or not being ambitious enough. You are exactly who you're supposed to be. Teaching those kids, making a difference in their lives, that's worth more than any executive salary or fancy title. I've left you enough money that you'll never have to worry about finances again. You can keep teaching because you love it, not because you're stuck. You can leave that marriage if it's making you miserable. You have options now. Use them wisely. And Ethan, that prenup Vanessa insisted on, best thing that ever happened to you. Not a penny of this inheritance is hers. I made sure of it. All my love, Mom. I read the letter twice, then a third time. My mother had known everything. She'd seen it all and had been planning for this moment. Natalie read over my shoulder and started laughing through her tears. Oh my gosh, she said. Mom basically just gave you the ultimate revenge. She wasn't wrong. I'd signed divorce papers that morning, papers based on a prenup designed to protect Vanessa's assets, papers that she'd rushed to file, probably worried I might try to claim some of her money in the divorce. But Vanessa had no idea that my mother had just left me $2.1 million. And thanks to the prenup she'd insisted on, not $1 of it was marital property. It was mine, completely, totally, only mine. Lawrence was smiling slightly. Dorothy anticipated the situation, he said. She asked me to give you this other letter to share with your wife, well, soon-to-be ex-wife, after the divorce is finalized. He handed me a second sealed envelope with Vanessa's name on it. Over the next few days, things moved fast. Natalie and I started the process of dealing with my mother's estate. The attorney explained it would take a few months to fully settle everything, but he could start distributing funds from the liquid accounts fairly quickly. Vanessa sent me daily texts about moving out of the apartment. She needed me gone by the end of the month so Preston could move in. Real classy. Didn't even wait for the divorce to be finalized before moving her boyfriend into our home. I started packing my stuff. Didn't need much. My clothes, some books, my laptop. I found a furnished short-term rental and moved in within a week. Left Vanessa the furniture, the kitchen stuff, everything we'd accumulated. I didn't need any of it anymore. The divorce moved through the system faster than expected. Uncontested divorces in our state can be finalized in as little as 30 days if both parties agree to everything. Since the prenup spelled everything out clearly, there was nothing to fight about. Well, nothing Vanessa knew about anyway. I got the call from my attorney on a Wednesday. The divorce was final. I was officially single. He asked if I felt okay about how everything had turned out. I told him I felt great. That night I drove to Vanessa's apartment, our old apartment, and knocked on the door. She answered, looking annoyed. What do you want? She asked. We're divorced. You don't get to just show up here. I know, I said. I just wanted to give you something. I handed her the sealed envelope from my mother's attorney, the one with her name on it. She took it suspiciously. What is this? She asked. A letter. You should read it. I turned to walk away, but stayed close enough to hear when she opened it. Call me petty, but I wanted to witness this moment. I heard paper rustling, then silence, then a sound like she'd choked on something. Wait, she called out. Wait, what is this? She was standing in the doorway holding the letter, face completely pale. Is this real? She asked. Your mother left you over $2 million? Yep, I said. Found out at the will reading. Day after you served me divorce papers at her funeral. Vanessa's hands were shaking. But you signed the divorce papers. We're divorced. This is all yours. Thanks to that prenup you insisted on, I said. Every penny is mine. Inheritances remain separate property, remember? You wanted to protect your family's money from me. Worked out great. It protected my mother's money from you. I watched the realization hit her. She'd rushed the divorce, pushed me to sign quickly, probably worried I'd try to claim some of her commission income or future inheritance. She'd wanted to end things before I could get any of her money. Instead, she'd ended things right before I inherited a fortune. You knew, she accused. You knew when you signed the papers. I didn't actually, I said. My mother never told me how much she had. The will reading was scheduled for Monday, but I signed your papers on Saturday. I had no idea what was coming. Vanessa's face went from pale to red. You can't do this, she said. This isn't fair. We can contest the divorce. On what grounds? I asked. You wanted out. You served me papers at my mother's funeral. You made me sign them in a parking lot. There's nothing to contest. The money is mine, protected by the same prenup you insisted on to protect your family's assets. Funny how these things work out. I watched her process this, watched her realize she'd given up over $2 million because she couldn't wait one more week to file for divorce. I heard you're already living with Preston, I said. Bet he's going to be disappointed to find out you're not the rich, successful real estate agent he thought you were. Daniel, wait, she said. Let's talk about this. Maybe we made a mistake. Oh, we made a mistake, I said. You made a mistake when you cheated on me. Made a mistake when you walked out of my mother's funeral. Made a mistake when you called her inconvenient timing. And you made a really big mistake when you pushed me to sign those divorce papers before asking if my mother had left me anything. Her neighbor had come out to see what the commotion was about. Vanessa noticed and lowered her voice. Please, Ethan, she said. We had good times. We can have them again. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We had good times when you thought I might have potential to make more money, I said. The second you realized I was happy being a teacher, you checked out. The only reason you're interested now is because I'm about to have more money than you. That's not true, she protested. It's completely true, I said. If my mother had left me nothing, You'd be thrilled with this divorce. You'd be bragging to your friends about upgrading to Preston. But now that I'm actually worth something to you, suddenly you made a mistake. I pulled out my phone and opened my texts, found the one she'd sent the morning of the funeral. See this? I asked. This is what you texted me about my mother's end, that it was perfect timing. You didn't even have the decency to pretend to care. And now you want me to believe you've changed? Vanessa had tears running down her face. Real tears this time, not the fake ones she'd used when she needed something from me. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry about all of it. About your mother, about Preston, about everything. I believe you're sorry, I said. Sorry you're not getting any of the money. Her face hardened, and the tears stopped. There was the real Vanessa. Your mother must have been laughing her head off writing that will, she said. Setting up her son to screw over his wife? Ex-wife, I corrected. And my mother wasn't screwing you over. She was protecting me. There's a difference. I walked back to my car. Vanessa called after me, alternating between apologies and anger. I ignored all of it, got in my car, and drove away from that chapter of my life for the last time. The aftermath was beautiful. Vanessa's family found out about my mother's inheritance within days. Small-town gossip moves fast. Her parents were reportedly furious that she'd rushed the divorce. Her brother Trevor actually called me, trying to smooth things over and suggest Vanessa and I explore reconciliation. I told him Vanessa was living with Preston and seemed very happy with her choice. He hung up. Vanessa tried calling multiple times. When I didn't answer, she sent emails, long ones, explaining how she'd made terrible mistakes, but we could work through them if I'd just give her another chance, how the thing with Preston was meaningless and she still loved me. I forwarded every email to my attorney without responding. He found them hilarious and said they'd be useful if she tried to contest the divorce, which she couldn't. Preston, the boyfriend, apparently found out about the inheritance too. According to Natalie's friend who knew someone who knew him, he broke up with Vanessa within days. Guess he wasn't interested in dating a woman who'd just given up millions. Real stand-up guy. Vanessa's real estate business took a hit when her reputation took a beating. Turns out people don't want to work with someone who served divorce papers at a funeral. Several clients dropped her, and her parents were reportedly helping her financially while she rebuilt her client base. Meanwhile, my life got exponentially better. I quit teaching not because I didn't love it, but because I wanted to teach on my terms. I used some of the inheritance to start a small tutoring business for underprivileged kids. I charge families based on what they can afford. Some pay full price, some pay nothing. I'm making a real difference in kids' lives without worrying about standardized test scores or administrative bureaucracy. I bought a modest house in a nice neighborhood. Nothing ostentatious, just a comfortable 3-bedroom with a yard. Paid cash, no mortgage. Natalie and I used some of my mother's money to start a scholarship fund in her name. Full-ride scholarships for students from low-income backgrounds pursuing education degrees. My mother would have loved that. I took the trip to Japan I'd always wanted but could never afford. Spent 3 weeks exploring and it was incredible. I started dating again and met a woman named Olivia at a community event. She's a librarian who makes about $45,000 a year and loves her job. She has no idea about the inheritance, and I'm not telling her yet. I want to make sure she likes me for me, not for what I have. 6 months after the divorce, I got a text from Vanessa's mother. She wanted to meet for coffee to clear the air. I agreed, curious what she'd say. She ordered some complicated drink and got straight to business. Vanessa deeply regrets how things ended, she said. She was going through a difficult time and made some poor choices. She made a lot of poor choices, I agreed. Starting with cheating on me for 8 months. Her face pinched. Yes, well, that was regrettable, she said. But people make mistakes. What matters is that she's learned from them. I'm sure she has, I said. Good for her. Ethan, she continued, you and Vanessa were good together before things got complicated. Maybe if you both tried again. You mean now that I have money? I asked. She had the grace to look embarrassed. I mean now that certain financial stresses aren't a factor, she said. The financial stress was never a factor for me, I said. I was happy with my teaching salary. Vanessa and your family were the ones who had a problem with it. She tried a few more angles, talking about family and forgiveness. I listened politely and said no to everything. Finally, she got angry. You're being vindictive, she said. You're punishing Vanessa for making one mistake. One mistake, I asked. Let's count them. She cheated for 8 months. She insulted my career for 3 years. She walked out of the funeral. She served me papers the day after my mother died. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern of behavior. Everyone deserves a second chance, she insisted. I gave her 3 years of second chances, I said. I'm done giving chances to people who don't respect me. Vanessa made one final attempt. She showed up at my tutoring center after hours. I was packing up when she knocked. Can we talk? She asked. Really talk? No lawyers, no family, just us. I let her in. I'm not here to ask for money, she said. I know that's what you think, but I'm not. Okay, I said. So why are you here? To apologize, she said. Really apologize. Not because I want something, but because you deserve an actual apology. I waited. I treated you terribly, she continued. You were a good husband. You were kind and patient and loving. And I repaid that by constantly criticizing you, trying to change who you fundamentally were. That was wrong. You deserve better. Yes, I did, I agreed. The thing with Preston was inexcusable, she said. I got caught up in this idea of what success looked like, and you didn't fit that picture. So I found someone who did. But it was hollow. Vanessa. I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't change anything. I know, she said. I'm not asking for anything to change. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I had and what I threw away. Not your money. You. The person you are. The teacher who cares about kids. The man who took care of his mother. She stood to leave. I hope you find someone who appreciates you for who you are, she said. I think I already have, I replied. She smiled sadly. Good, she said. You deserve it. She walked to the door, then turned back. Your mother was right about me, wasn't she? She asked. She saw through everything from day one. My mother was good at reading people, I said. Tell her I'm sorry too, Vanessa said. Even though she's not here to hear it. I think she knows, I said. Vanessa left, and that was the last time I saw her. I heard she eventually moved to another city for a fresh start. As for me, life is genuinely good. Really good. I'm teaching on my own terms. Living in a house I own outright. Dating a woman who loves me for who I am. Not what I have or what I could become. My mother's final gift wasn't just the money, it was the freedom to live authentically without compromise. She saw what I couldn't see, protected what I didn't know needed protecting, and gave me the chance to build a life that actually makes me happy. The tutoring business has grown beyond what I initially imagined. I now have 3 other teachers working with me, all people who share my passion for education over profit. We've helped over 50 kids in the past 6 months, and seeing their progress makes every day worthwhile. Some of these kids were failing in traditional school settings, but with individualized attention and patience, they're thriving. That's what teaching should be about. Not test scores and bureaucracy, but actually connecting with students and helping them discover their potential. Olivia and I have been dating for 4 months now, and it's the healthiest relationship I've ever had. She doesn't care that I drive a modest car or that I live simply. She appreciates that I'm passionate about my work and that I treat people with kindness and respect. We spend weekends hiking, visiting museums, cooking together, just enjoying each other's company without any pressure or expectations. It's refreshing to be with someone who values the same things I do. The prenup Vanessa insisted on to protect her wealth ended up being the very thing that secured my future. Sometimes karma doesn't just come around. It comes around with interest and a legal document that makes it ironclad. I miss my mother every single day, but I'm living the life she wanted for me, and that's the best way I know to honor her memory. She taught me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the impact you have on others and the authenticity with which you live your life. I finally understand what she meant.